Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. I've got the lapel mic, I forgot. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? I like to move, so I gotta be free of the podium, and I'm gonna use the lapel mic. So I actually said I wasn't gonna ever do this again, and that is speak at an event that I'm organizing, because it's just a lot. But we really wanted someone to speak on fish. And yes. And we wanted fish represented, and unfortunately, there's not many people out there that are speaking on fish in a vegan context. So I felt like I really wanted to delve in, do the research, and create an amazing presentation. I hope you feel it's amazing. It was really incredible to me, the research, what I learned. So I got a lot of the information from this amazing book. I'll just plug the book right now, What a Fish Knows by Jonathan Balcombe. Some amazing information. It's basically a compilation of the latest science on fish, and we're going to talk a lot about it. So we're going to take a journey to the depths of the mysterious ocean, where there is a diversity of life, an incredible diversity of life going on down there. And you know, fish are the original vertebrates. All life began in the ocean. And of course, some crawled out onto land and evolved and became us and other mammals and avians. And others decided to stay in the water. And they became an incredible array of life that are the fishes that we're going to be talking about. And you know, because they're in the ocean, kind of far away from us, distant and separate, and fish, they have no need for extensive facial movements or eyelids or expressive mouths. And because of that, and because of people's lack of imagination and thinking that only animals that look like us can be like us or feel like us or have emotion like us, we've unfortunately categorized the fish improperly, and a lot of us, we have false perceptions thinking that they're simple, unfeeling, primitive, unintelligent. But science is debunking this as we speak. There has been just an amazing amount, just a snowballing of science in the last 2 decades on fish, and what we know now is incredible. Unfortunately, it's not what the layman person knows, it's what science knows, and that's why I want to bring it to you so that you can bring it to everyone, so everyone can know how amazing fish are. And so there's 28,000 different types of fish that we know of. We're discovering new species all the time. There was actually 4 species of shark discovered just in 2014, new species. So we're discovering new species all the time. There's bony fish, fish with bones. There's cartilaginous fish, fish that just have the cartilage like sharks and rays, stingrays. And both members have all 10 body systems that land mammals and avians have: skeletal, muscular, nervous system, cardiovascular, respiratory, sensory, digestive, reproductive, endocrine, and excretory. And I'm going to start right away. Actually, I'm going to try to use this thing. So I want to start right away with the question, do fish feel pain? I just want to get this out of the way, because unfortunately, it's still a question out there that people are unsure of. And I'm going to start by telling you a story from my childhood. When I was a little girl, in my elementary years, I grew up in southern Florida. We lived in southern Florida, Fort Lauderdale area. And fortunately, we didn't fish often. I mean, it could have been worse, and we could have gone out more frequently being in that area. My father was a businessman, so he was often in a suit and tie, and we just didn't do that. But this one time, he did take me fishing. I was maybe about 6 years old. It's one of my earliest memories. And he took me out. We went out on the boat, and he caught this fish and brought her into the boat, and she was just flapping, and her tail and everything, her little body was, and I must have been freaking out just as much as she was freaking out, because my dad kept saying to me, "Oh, honey, they don't feel pain. They don't feel pain. This is just reflexes." And I remember thinking, God, Dad, I think you're wrong. Do you not see the obvious distress? I mean, of course, I didn't say that, but I remember thinking that and thinking, and it of course set me down a questioning road about animals the rest of my life, but questioning about what we think we know about animals. So people have this perception, this misconception that fish don't feel pain, that it's just reflexes, it's just muscle movement. Well, science has completely debunked this. There is both physiological and behavioral studies that have been done extensively on pain and if fish feel pain. And fish have neurons that detect potential harm on their bodies, like high temperatures or pressure. When injured, fish produce the same naturally occurring opioids that mammals do, that avians do, as a natural pain reliever. This has absolutely been studied. Also when injured, the activity in the brain of the fish is equivalent to that of land mammals and avians. There's this cascade of electrical impulses that go to the brain when they are injured, and not only to the hindbrain and brain stem that are responsible for reflexes, but also a lot of activity around the area that's essential for conscious sensory perception. So they are perceiving the pain. And I'm not going to go into details of the studies. There's a lot in the book. There's a lot of detail, and I'll just say at this point, I absolutely don't condone what was done to these poor fish to find out if they felt pain or not. I don't like that it was done to them, and absolutely don't condone it. But because it was, I am going to use the studies. I am going to use the data in hopes that we gain sympathy and empathy for these animals. So I just wanted to give that little bit of a disclaimer on that. And some of the things that were done, I won't go into too much detail, but they had acid and bee venom injected into different parts of their bodies, their lips and other parts, needles stuck in them. This one study, they put a little heating device on their body, like belted onto the side of their body, and then they turned up the heat to different levels up to the point where they're burning the skin. I mean, anyway, I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. But they learned a great deal, and every single time what they learned is that, yes, fish feel pain. Behaviorally, fish react the same way as mammals and avians. They will cease normal activity, they'll rub the affected areas, sometimes thrashing or rocking side to side, or just going to the bottom of the tank and resting. And then if painkillers are introduced, like morphine or other painkillers, then depending on the level, normal activity will resume, and these other behaviors will reduce. So again and again, they found that yes, fish feel pain. So the conclusion was absolutely, fish respond to varying different types of painful stimuli, burning, cutting, stabbing, chemical damage like acid, both psychologically and behaviorally. Fish consciously experience pain. So we can put that question to rest. And so reputable scientific bodies are taking note of this and are actually changing policy and procedures around it. And these are two great examples. I'll read them here. The first one is from the Smithsonian Institute. The collective evidence is now robust enough that biologists and veterinarians increasingly accept fish pain as a reality. And the second one is from the American Veterinary Medical Association. They updated their guidelines on euthanasia in 2013, and they added this: suggestions that fin fish respond to pain merely represent simple reflexes has been refuted. The preponderance of accumulated evidence supports the position that fin fish should be accorded the same considerations as terrestrial vertebrae in regard to relief of pain. All right, so now that we've put that to rest, and it's interesting because now science is kind of shifting gears, and there's so many studies now being done on the lives of fish, their lives, their individual lives, the complexity of their lives, their emotions, all of that. And it's just, really amazing what they've found. So science has discovered that fish are sentient, they are aware, they're communicative, they're social, they can be virtuous, they can be mischievous, they can use tools, they innovate and solve problems, they solve puzzles, they play, they engage in all the different various play behaviors that science has recorded, object play, solitary play, social play with each other, interactive play with other species, interspecies play. And they have preferences for who they want to spend time with, who they want to mate with, who they want to have babies with. Even within the same species, sometimes they'll have differing tastes for food and have preference for different foods. They're individuals with their own lives. So communication, this is a really interesting one. So fish are not just silent spectators. Fish don't have ears, the same that we do, and so it was often thought that they didn't hear or make noise because of this. But we've actually found that that is absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. They, because our ears detect sound in air and not in water, we weren't hearing all of the amazing noises that fish were making, but now technological advancements in like underwater sound detecting equipment has found that they have just a wide range of acoustic noises going on down there, and we know that a fish's body can produce sound and perceive sound. They are hearing in their bodies. And some of the classifications of the communication that's going on down there: hums, whistles, thumps, creaks, grunts, pops, croaks, pulses, drums, knocks, purrs, clicks, moans, chirps, buzzes, growls, and snaps. Snaps. So there's a lot of communication going on down there with fish. And parenting. I found this really fascinating, this section of the book. I think a lot of people's misconception is that fish just lay eggs, go away, the eggs hatch, little hatchlings fend for themselves. And that is the case with some species, but not even close to all. There's thousands and thousands of species that actually offer some kind of parenting, protection, caregiving to the eggs and offspring. Some species do have live birth. Sharks and stingrays and others do have live birth as well. It's not all egg laying, but egg laying can really be extremely complex. There's elaborate ways that they go to, extremes that they go to protect the eggs. Sometimes they'll create nests out of sand and rocks, plant material. There's some fish that create a special saliva that creates a little bubble raft around the eggs to protect them and have them develop in this little bubble raft. So really cool stuff. It's amazing. Some of them keep the little hatchlings or eggs or hatchlings in their mouths or in special pouches, and this is actually both genders. Of course, the seahorse is famous for the dad being the primary caregiver and having a little pouch. The dad has a pouch that keeps the little hatchlings in the pouch. But it's not only seahorses. There's numerous other fish that where the dad is the primary parent. Some, and then others that both male and female do the parenting. So lots of great stuff going on, and they go to great lengths. They're very dedicated. Even little hatchlings that are kept in the mouth. Some of the fish keep them in their mouths for protection. The parent keeps them in the mouth. They'll take in food, and the babies are eating that food, and sometimes they won't eat for weeks and will drop a third of their body weight, sacrificing for those babies. So going on, there's amazing stuff. And again, these are all just these incredible studies that I was reading, not only in this book, but also all over. But memory and learning is another area that's been extensively studied. Memory is one of those things that, again, there's myths around it, that people think that fish don't have long-term memory. There's this urban myth that goldfish only have a 3-second memory or something like that. Absolutely not true. Not true at all. They have long-term memory. An anecdotal story is about a fish named Bentley, and he was a humphead wrasse. And that is what this kind of fish is a humphead wrasse. And they can get really big, a lot bigger than this. And I loved this picture because this diver, and and this fish are kind of having a moment. And so Bentley was in a tank, and whenever they fed Bentley, they banged a gong, and he came and ate. And they did that at different times of day. It was kind of random, and they would gong the gong. They took that gong away for 11 months, and as soon as they brought that gong back, they kept feeding Bentley, but as soon as they brought that gong back, boom, Bentley came running knowing what that gong meant. So they have memory. And learning. So I'm going to give a little bit of a disclaimer around all this. It really shouldn't be intelligence that is the gauge of whether we protect an animal, yes, whether we, whether we protect an animal, whether we respect an animal, whether we exploit an animal. That absolutely shouldn't be the gauge. The gauge should be, do they suffer? Do they experience pain? And we have already established that, okay? So I just want to get that out of the way. But the reason that of course, I think that these studies are important because we get to know them. We get to know that these fish are individuals. They have lives of their own down there in the ocean. So I find that fascinating. And the reason I'm going to give this particular study around learning and puzzles is because it kind of flips what we think we know about animals on its head. So a puzzle that was given to numerous animals, 2 plates of food, same amount of food, same type of food. The only difference is there was a red plate and a blue plate, okay? And if you started eating on the red plate, the blue plate would get taken away. But if you started eating on the red plate, they would both stay, and you'd get a double amount of food. Okay, so it was a puzzle, and it took trial and error for the animals to figure it out, right? So they did this study on capuchin monkeys, orangutans, and chimpanzee, as well as fish. Guess who figured it out faster? The fish. Yeah, the fish. The fish, it took an average of 45 tries to figure it out. The primates took an average of 100 tries, and actually some individual chimps never did figure it out, but all the fish did. So it just flips what we think we know on its head, okay, what we think we know about animals. And this is a great quote from Jonathan Balcom in that book about that study. When fishes outperform primates on a mental task, it's another reminder of how brain size, body size, presence of fur, feathers, or scales, and evolutionary proximity to humans is wobbly criteria for gauging intelligence. So, yeah. Touch is another thing. Some fish are very tactile and love touch. There's all kinds of videos online of fish being petted, like when people reach in and coming and being petted. Also of divers going down and connecting with fish, eels, all kinds of animals. And they will actually, cuddle and snuggle and hug, like this diver and this fish. So they're very, they are very tactile. They love touch. Some, not all. And fear and anxiety, this is another one that I think is relevant to the discussion that we're having, which of course is, should we kill and eat fish? It is documented and scientifically confirmed that fish feel fear. They respond to dangerous situations the same as any other animal. They can quicken their breathing. They release distress pheromones. They show signs of panic. They may flee or freeze or try to look bigger or change color. And when there's been an incident of fear or anxiety, they'll often avoid that location, again, memory, and sometimes they stop eating for a while because they're in distress. So, it's challenging for humans to conceptualize and to consider that animals are sentient and conscious. But science is helping us out with that. And science came together, scientists came together, leading animal scientists in zoology, biology, came together, and they created what's called the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. This is in 2012. And it stated really technically, so I'm just going to summarize it in layman's terms. And what they were talking about included fish and also non-vertebrates like octopus. And basically they were saying in this declaration that consciousness is almost undoubtedly present in the animal kingdom. Emotion is almost undoubtedly present in the animal kingdom. And consciousness does not require a big brain or a backbone or vertebrae. So I'm going to tell a little story. There was a sweet little goldfish named Blackie, and he was a Blackmore goldfish, and this is an example of a Blackmore goldfish. And Blackie was unfortunately born deformed. He was born a little wonky. He couldn't swim well and stayed at the bottom of his tank. And he was put in a tank with a larger goldfish named Big Red. And Big Red took an immediate interest in Blackie. And Big Red would swim under Blackie and lift him up and help him to swim and swim with him in tandem. And especially when they were being fed and the flakes of food were coming down, Big Red would scoop under Blackie and take him up to eat, to make sure that he got fed. There's all kinds of these amazing stories out there. And the observer of this behavior felt that it really could be nothing but compassion and friendship. It's a beautiful story. You know, so fish think, fish feel, fish have their own lives. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk about fishing and how we kill and eat fish. The number of fish killed each year far exceeds the number of people who have ever existed on Earth. Wow. I'm going to repeat that. The number of fish killed each year far exceeds the number of people who have ever existed on Earth. It's staggering. It's a massacre. So it's estimated that over 100 billion farmed fish are killed globally, and another 1 to 3 trillion fish are caught from the wild. They're the least protected animal. There is no laws in the US regarding how fish are caught, treated, killed, nothing. And it just breaks my heart that fishing is seen as this American pastime, you know. It's like a symbol of vacation and relaxation and bonding between parent and child and all this. But, you know, it is anything but those things for the fish. So I want to start with longline fishing. Longline fishing is, this is a commercial way that we fish, where a line goes out. This is an illustration of it. Line goes out. It can be 60 miles long. The lines come down with bait and hook. It can be over 2,500 hooks. And after researching all the ways that we kill fish, I would have to say this, I think, is the worst. Absolutely the worst. So the fish comes up and is hooked and you know, eats the bait, gets hooked and caught on this hook. And in recreational fishing, the fish would immediately be taken out of the water, and whatever's going to happen to him is going to happen to him. In longline fishing, he's caught there. He lingers there for hours or days, fighting, trying to get this hook out of his body, whether it's hooked onto his mouth or in his throat or down his esophagus if he swallowed it, and he's fighting it and fighting it. It's got to be so traumatic. What a horrible, horrible, traumatic thing to happen. And then, so the long line comes into the ship, and the fish will be taken into the boat and will suffocate. That's how most fish die in commercial fishing, is that they're brought out and suffocate just from being taken out of the water. And this is the equivalent of us drowning, of us being pulled into the water. It is traumatic. It is frightening. It can take minutes. It's painful. It's a horrible way to die, for them to suffocate. And deep sea dwelling fish actually have it even worse. When they are pulled quickly up out of the ocean, something called decompression can happen. Fish have a little swim bladder inside them that inflates and deflates as they come up and down from the depths because of the deep pressure, all the pressure that's down there. And when they're pulled up quickly, these swim bladders can just inflate unnaturally fast, and it can push on the other organs. Organs can explode and collapse. There were numerous studies done to injuries sustained by fish being caught, both recreational and commercially, from decompression and what was happening to their bodies. And it's a gruesome list. There's esophageal inversion, where the esophagus turns inside out and comes out of their mouths. bulging of the eye socket, arterial embolism, hemorrhage, organ tearing, organ damage, a kind of prolapse where their rectum turns inside out and comes out of their body. Horrible things happening to their poor little bodies. Fish who do make it past, through all of this and make it to the knife don't have it much better. There was a study done on fish slaughter in 2002 and the degrees of suffering for fish slaughter, and actually cutting up a fish and bleeding them out, either cutting down their bodies or decapitating them, was considered actually the highest level of suffering, the most suffering. It was considered very high. Other ways that we kill fish: electrocution, suffocation that we talked about, just bringing them out to suffocate, being put on ice, which is basically a prolonged suffocation. These were all classified in the study as actually being less painful, but still the classification was high on the suffering of that kind of death. And some of these methods, the electrocution, being put on ice, they can cause immobility before there's a loss of sensibility. So it appears that the suffering has ceased, but it hasn't. And there's an equivalent to this in poultry slaughter, where the bird is hung upside down, shackled by her feet, going through the process, and she'll be dunked into an electrified bath where she is paralyzed. Her body can't move, but she's still aware of what's happening. She still feels everything. So it's a similar situation to that. Very horrible. So, I keep forgetting I have this thing. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the environmental impact, which is generally what we hear about when we hear about fishing, and I'm glad that there's some awareness around this. I did want to focus mostly on individual fish and their suffering and their lives, but I do feel it's important to talk about the environmental impact because it's huge. It's massive. We really are destroying our oceans with fishing. So the technology that's used is amazing. I mean, it's just crazy what the kind of technology that we're using to fish. There's sonar, satellite navigation like GPS, depth sensors, detailed maps, spotter planes, helicopters. Humans are undoubtedly the most dangerous and deadly animal on the planet. The fish have nowhere to hide. So another way that we kill animals in commercial fishing is by netting. And this is where these big factory trawler ships will go way out and deep into the ocean, drop miles and miles and miles of netting, and just pull everything in the path into the boat. And about 20% is picked out to be sold. Same with the long line, about 20% is picked out to be sold. The rest is thrown back dead. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. But 7 of the top 10 marine fish species are classified as fully exploited or overexploited. Nearly 90% of all large predatory fish in the ocean are now gone. We're seeing a 62% drop in seabirds, a 60% destruction of coral reefs, all due to fishing. And when we think about the fishing industry, we often don't think about subsidizing. And when we think about government subsidies, often we think it's really only going to meat, dairy, and eggs as far as going to animal exploitation for our food. But actually, the fishing industry, the US government gives the fishing industry $35 billion in subsidies a year. So it's huge. They are heavily, heavily subsidized. So I mentioned the bycatch is what the industry calls it. I call it bykill because all of these animals go back dead. More than 70 million tons of so-called bycatch is killed every year. Over 300,000 sea animals such as non-target fish species, sea turtles, dolphins, whales, sharks, sea stars, eels, albatross, and other seabirds. For every pound of shrimp netted in the Gulf of Mexico, 4 pounds of bycatch is wasted and thrown back overboard dead. And endangered species. I mean, endangered species are actually starving without enough to eat because we're fishing the ocean in some areas. They're actually starving. but they're also getting caught in the nets, caught on the long lines, and caught in all of the discarded fishing gear. When a line snaps or there's a hole in the net, the fishermen just throw it overboard. And it is absolutely polluting our ocean, all of this fishing gear. These marine mammals are getting tangled, strangled, unable to swim, unable to eat. I mean, if you look at this image of these sea lions, I mean, I just can't imagine what a horrifying death this must have been for them, to be tangled and unable to surface to breathe. They drowned like that. Just horrible. My friend Kamal is videotaping today. He always does an amazing job every year. And he makes short videos on environmental impacts and veganism. And we've talked about doing a video on someone sitting down to a plate of food, of seafood, you know, shrimp or a sushi or something. And on the table is all the bykill. There's a dolphin there and a sea turtle and a seabird and all the fish. So people could see how much destruction, how much death they're creating with just this one plate of food. So we should do that. Fish farming is absolutely not the answer. A lot of people think that fish farming is better. Fish farming, we see, it's basically keeping tons and tons of fish, thousands of fish in these small, like swimming pool-sized tanks. And we see the same problems that you get when you concentrate land mammals on, concentrated feeding operations in dairies and in chicken houses. You get extreme amounts of waste and sick animals. And I've actually been to a couple of fish farms, and when you're walking up to the water, it looks like mud. It's so black and mucky. And it's because they are swimming in their own waste. I mean, it's just fish waste that they're in. And then you get up closer to the tank and you realize there are so many fish. I mean, they're just on top of each other. It looks miserable. And because of that, they're often sick. So fish farms are notorious for just dumping an arsenal of chemicals into the water, antibiotics, other things to try and keep the fish healthy. Sea lice is a huge problem. Sea lice isn't really a problem out in the wild, but sea lice thrive on fish farms because the next host fish is just, a couple inches away. And sea lice can eat away at the flesh and eyes of fish. It can be very painful, prolonged suffering, and actually it's considered acceptable and expected to lose 10 to 30% of the fish to sea lice in fish farming. Awful. And fish are wasted on farmed animals. 1/3 of the world's fish catch is not eaten by humans. It's fed to farmed animals. In fact, more fish are consumed by animals that we kill and eat in the US than by the entire human population of all the countries of Western Europe combined. What a waste. What an absolute waste. And this is another one that's fascinating. Overfishing is actually contributing to climate change. So how this works is that when there's billions of fish in the ocean, as there has been for billions of years, naturally, the fish droppings, the waste, actually, thank you, it creates a carbon sink. It draws carbon. All of the droppings draw carbon from the atmosphere and becomes a carbon sink. Because we've done such massive fishing, there's not as much waste in the water, fish droppings, and it's actually hastening global warming. We're losing that carbon sink. I mean, it just shows how interconnected everything is and how our actions have really unforeseen and profound consequences. So if you don't eat fish, that's awesome, thank you. If you do eat fish, I really hope today is an inspiration to you. I hope today will inspire you, all this information from all the speakers, and I hope that it will be the catalyst to go vegan. Make tomorrow the last day you ever, or make today or yesterday the last day you ever ate fish. If you don't eat fish, and you are vegan, thank you, the fish thank you, the oceans thank you. Here's a way you can take it further. We're going to skip that one. Reduce your plastic waste. Reduce your plastic waste. Vegan really isn't enough for the oceans. We are dumping one garbage load of plastic and garbage into the ocean every minute. Every minute. It's 8 million tons a year. There's a place in the Pacific where, because of the currents, all of this plastic is gathering and has created this plastic island, and they call it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is larger than the size of Texas. Horrible. And just awful what we're doing to the ocean. We're finding plastic in seabirds and fish. They're eating it. It's really, really polluting our world. So please, I encourage you to find ways in your life to reduce your plastic use. So I'm going to give a little plug to Fish Feel. Fish Feel is, yay, they are the only all-vegan organization focused on fish in the United States. They're out of DC. The woman that runs Fish Feel and founded Fish Feel is Mary Finelli. She's been a longtime friend of United Poultry Concerns, and she's amazing, and I love that she started this organization. So please go to fishfeel.org and get some more information. There's tons of resources there, and support her. So I'm just going to end with this wonderful quote, again from the book, Jonathan Balcombe's book. A fish is an individual with a personality and relationships. He or she can plan and learn, perceive and innovate, soothe and scheme, experience moments of pleasure, fear, playfulness, pain, and joy. A fish feels and knows. Thank you. And I do have time for some questions if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
That opening statement about euthanasia, it seems like the SPCA or somebody should say we got to start compassionately killing fish if we're going to kill them at all. I mean, the things you showed here, that's torture. How can we do that?
Well, that is actually, interestingly, kind of starting in Europe. And I think I might have it. I didn't. Oh yeah, I do, actually. I was gonna have this in the presentation, but because of time, I decided to cut it. But, and it's tricky because, we get into kind of similar situations that we're getting into with land animals and avians with humane killing and humane, meat. So it's tricky. However, it is absolutely acknowledging that these animals feel pain. And that they suffer in the death. So, so you got to weigh all that. But interestingly, so I'll just tell you, I was going to mention this. In the United Kingdom and Norway, fish farms have largely adopted more humane methods of slaughtering. In the Netherlands, there's been a law passed requiring anglers to take a course on how to catch and release fish more humanely. I mean, it's. Again, it's you have to take it with a grain of salt that we should not be killing these animals at all. But that is happening, actually. There are laws being passed that are recognizing that fish feel pain, and we should do it differently. But how about not killing them at all?
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, on that point, I just want to clarify that anybody who reads any articles suggesting that, for example, recognizing that lobsters feel pain, therefore we should be electrifying them in tanks and so forth before they're actually boiled alive. Please do never, ever think that the use of electricity on a living sentient body is anything but torture.
Yeah.
I know this is about the poultry industry, what Hope was saying about how what they do is they drag these birds, all chickens and turkeys, they drag them through electrified water. They drag them through water so that it isn't only that they become immobilized and paralyzed, but on top of everything else, they're experiencing electric shocks going through their bodies. Mm-hmm. I mean, just shock your finger, okay? electric shocks going through your eardrums, your eyeballs, your heart. And remember, if you're familiar at all with the effort to try to humanely kill, actually electrocute, one single person on death row, and the horror of that. But in the case of the fish, or the lobsters, and all of the birds, they're not even attempting to electrocute, i.e. kill them. All they are doing is attempting to paralyze the muscles of their feather follicles in the case of the birds. So their feathers will come out more easily after they're dead. And they give them just enough milliamperes to immobilize, i.e. paralyze them with agonizing torture of electric shocks. So don't ever, ever think that things are getting better for lobsters or sea creatures, because now, adding to all the other hell that we expose them to, now we're adding electricity. So don't ever think that's an answer to anything, because it is not.
Yeah.
That is evil.
Absolutely. I might have time for one more question. Okay.
So what are some ways that we could reduce our plastic use? And are there any resources for like zero waste, for example?
There's tons of resources online, for sure. What I've done personally is I have, where I think I use the most plastic is in my food, of course, at the grocery store and the things that I buy, single-use plastic things. And even like soy milk containers, they're plastic lined. There's plastic in there. So, or like almond milk, whatever. And one thing that I've done is I now make all my own nut milk from scratch. It's a lot healthier too. So I'm just, totally buying the seeds, and I don't use plastic bags. I use canvas bags that cotton bags that I wash, and get the seeds, and I make nut milk that way so that I don't have the throwaway containers for almond and soy milk. So little things like that, find ways. Look in your refrigerator, look in your cabinets, and see, where am I using a lot of plastic, and how I can reduce that. Does anybody else have another example? We got to break though.
No plastic straws.
Absolutely, yeah. You don't need a straw. Get used to just not using a straw. It is unnecessary. Yeah. Well, because it's waste, and that is one of the ways our landfills are filling up. So we got nowhere else to put it, and we're dumping it in the ocean.